AI compute requirement, which seems to be moving, certainly by the new World Energy Outlook report that you gave, moving constantly up the scale. I suppose my very obvious question to you is, how is this demand going to be met?
I think the energy security and the crisis, they don't have very obvious winners. Energy demand is growing, definitely, but we have to be a bit careful. While oil and gas will be with us years to come, what grows the most, very impressive, is the electricity demand. As IES says, we are entering the age of electricity. Electricity demand grows almost 3 times higher than the total energy demand. In addition to the usual drivers of electricity demand, there are 3 additional new drivers. One is that you mentioned, Robin, the AI, data centers. One data center, medium size, consumes electricity as much as a town with 100,000 households. And you need 24/7 electricity. There is no AI without electricity. This is number one. Number 2, air conditioners. This is a big driver of global electricity consumption around the world. And the third one, the additional one, is the electric cars. Okay? Today, 1/4 of all the cars sold in the world are electric. So they push the electricity demand growth, and it will be met by mainly 3 things: renewables, natural gas, and nuclear power. They will be met. And now, what I see, Robin, to finish my 2 minutes, I deal with the energy issues long time. This is my 19th Davos, and if I can tell you something, energy and geopolitics were always interwoven. Mm-hmm. But I have never ever seen that the energy security risks are so multiplying, and the dark and long shadow of geopolitics and energy sector overall. So therefore, energy security, in my view, should be elevated to the level of national security today. And I can understand that many countries prefer, to generate their own energy as much as possible, which gives a boost to nuclear power, renewables, or other energy sources. And 2, when they make energy trades and deals and contracts, they not only look at how many dollars, how many euros, how many yens, they also look, who is my partner? Can I rely in the long term to this partner? This comes as a topic as well.
Energy security is often associated with high prices. In other words, the worry is if the price is too high, we're not going to be able to get access to the energy. And yet the weird thing is, with all of this increasing demand we've discussed so far, the price of oil and gas, at least, seems to be relatively low. Please explain the conundrum.
No, I am sorry to tell you, but International Energy Agency was perfectly right how we see the oil, gas, and copper markets. Last year, I said 3 things here. Oil markets, oil demand is slowing down, and the lots of supply is coming from American Quintet, US, Canada, Brazil, Guyana, and Argentina. Therefore, oil prices will go down. And some people said, IES saying because climate change, net zero, this zero, rubbish. Oil prices are 20% down compared to last year. We are perfectly clear. Second, natural gas. And this is happening, as you said, Robin, in a world, we have Iran, Venezuela, Palestine, many other issues. Second, natural gas. Colleagues, a lot of gas is coming to the markets. We shouldn't forget this. LNG from United States, from Qatar, from Australia, from Canada. This year, 50 BCM. Next year, 80 BCM coming additional to the markets. What is 80 BCM? 80 BCM next year, just additional growth, is equal to more or less the Japan imports of gas. Just 1 year. They said gas prices will come down. They come down. And the last one, copper. I said in a big meeting with the lots of presidents, I said copper prices will go up because of the, when you look at the demand, age of electricity means copper, plus the investments are not keeping pace. And I remember the president of Peru, she came and kissed me. I hope you are right, she said. And today, copper prices are 45% higher than last year. Again, we were spot on. And I told this to Mike as well. I mean, we make reports, Mike makes money, so this is the difference. So we were perfectly right on all these three topics, and the reason is, Robin, lots of supply is coming. It will not be forever, but at least 3-4 years, we may well see downward pressure on the oil and gas prices because of the huge amount of supply coming from the United States, first of all, but some other countries.
Certainly looking at the landscape today, and I agree with everything that Fatih said, it's easy to draw historical analogies to maybe the 19th century scramble for resources in Africa, or even post-World War II in the Middle East. And I would say there's no question that the intensified geopolitical competition between great powers is playing out in more competition for energy resources, particularly as the energy system becomes more complex. I mean, obviously, I think many of us have Venezuela on our mind. There's lots of reasons we can point to why the Trump administration may have been motivated to take the action it did against Maduro and in Venezuela earlier this month. But at least one of them certainly points not just to oil and a desire to control oil, whatever that means specifically, but a desire to control who develops Venezuela's oil. So a real perception that Venezuela's oil trajectory and who controls that or develops it is part and parcel part of dominating the Western Hemisphere. So there's a desire not just for physical control, but a desire to ensure that others don't control resources. And Venezuela, I think, really did up the game, obviously, by using military force into the equation. But this is not new within the last year or two or even 3 years. We can look back at China's energy strategy over decades, really, and see that there's been a concerted effort to focus on the ability to control or have access to resources. And we look at China's approach in Africa beginning in the 1990s. First, that was, actually having ownership over resources. And as China has become more sophisticated and as the energy system has become more complex, China's strategy has diversified. And it's moved away from trying to own oil resources in Latin America or Africa or other parts of the world to a place where it is looking to ensure energy access by building infrastructure through the BRI initiative, by having contracts, looking at the DRC and other places for critical minerals. This is a long-term strategy of China. So I would say, yes, we're seeing an intensification. It's not entirely new. What is very different from any of the historical analogies that we might have looked upon in the past is that producer countries, the countries with these resources, have more agency now. I won't say they're on equal footing to some of the great powers, but they certainly know better how to try to negotiate better contracts. And we see a wave of resource nationalism, whether it's in Chile or in Indonesia, where policies like banning the export of just raw nickel is a way of exerting more control over a country's resources. So it is more positive in that way, but it certainly opens the door to more resource competition ahead. But let me say a couple of things about what energy dominance means. And of course, this phrase and this approach has been consistent from the first Trump administration to the second Trump administration. But I think there's actually some very critical differences that we see evolving in the second administration around the same concept of energy dominance. In the first administration, it ended up being probably more rhetoric than action. There was a very domestic focus, and a focus not exclusively, but primarily on fossil fuels. And the idea is just to build up America's capacity to be a producer and an exporter of fossil fuels, to expedite infrastructure, these types of things. And under the first Trump administration, of course, the U.S. continued to augment its energy prowess and became, as President Trump at the time, really lauded that America was the largest exporter and producer of oil and gas. This, of course, was as much about technology and about global markets than it was about actually Trump administration policy. There was a new dynamic in the first Trump administration where energy became intertwined with like commercial deals and tariffs and trade deals, and buy more American oil and gas as a way of addressing the deficit. So that was a new element to it. But now moving to the second Trump administration, I think we have all of that combined with three additional things. I'd say they're sort of emerging. The first is a more aggressive approach against renewables. Which I think in the first term, it was just sort of neutral on renewables. Renewables were still able to flourish. Now we see that there seems to be more ideology in it.
Not just geopolitics, not that China dominates renewables, therefore we mustn't depend on them?
I think many analysts would say, if we're thinking about American dominance, it's not just fossil fuels, it's American innovation, and that renewables should be part of an American energy dominance strategy. And there's a more ideological approach there. Secondly, there's this focus on price, and the president is very explicit about this. And as you pointed out, Robin, $53 oil is actually not consistent with high American oil production. So there's a tension there, undoubtedly. And of course, American companies feel that acutely. But then thirdly, and I think maybe most interesting, and this is kind of a supposition at this point, is that in the first term we were thinking about, or the Trump administration was thinking about, using American energy prowess as a foreign policy tool. So trying to, affect things in the globe by using American energy prowess, which turns out to be difficult. Now it looks as if the Trump administration is thinking about using American foreign policy tools, which include diplomacy, but also military force, to enhance its energy prowess, to enhance its control or influence over global energy markets. And I think that will have some significant long-term implications. Just, Fatih mentioned the American quintet and all the investment that was made in the Western Hemisphere. If we have a different approach by the Trump administration, by America in the Western Hemisphere towards resources where foreign policy tools like military force are used to secure ownership, this is going to, I think, quell investment rather than enhance it.
How do you think these geopolitics are affecting the Middle East's role as a central hub of global oil and gas production? Whenever people said geopolitics and oil and gas, everyone meant the Middle East in the past, but at the moment, we seem to be looking just about everywhere else. Obviously, there are worries in the Middle East, you're well aware of them. But just can you connect today's geopolitics and how it's changed with the position of the Middle East?
Geopolitical instability reinforces, if anything, our region, the Middle East's role as a supplier that has scale and affordability, and the availability, and of course some of the lowest carbon reserves, and of course the geographical location. And in this US-China global friction, the Middle East is managing to remain on good terms with both sides. As far as the US role, at least what we've seen as a private sector player in the Middle East now over 50 years, I was wondering, does America first mean America only? Is it just going to be pushing US LNG exports and focusing on domestic energy? That's not what we've seen, actually. We've seen incredible engagement and global messaging on the importance of all forms of energy, including renewables, but natural gas in particular, which is an area that we very much focus on now. 80% of our production is natural gas. To give an example, one project that we've just completed in the Kurdistan region north of Iraq which received US Development Finance Corporation support, is achieving 24/7 electricity there. So enhancing stability, political and socio-economic, and big carbon emissions savings as well. So whether it was through the Trump administration, Biden administration, now through the Trump administration, and enhancing Iraq's energy independence, it was all aligned. So that's been very good to see from our point of view. On the point of AI, and I think this is interesting also for our region, in the past, diversification was about moving away from energy, trying to find other sectors, and with mixed results, or some might say poor results across the region as a whole. Now, suddenly, there's a diversification that's based on energy, because AI needs energy in huge amounts. I mean, looking at people don't appreciate the extent to which it does. You look at your ChatGPT on your phone, every search there is 10 times what a Google search used to be. You make a 1-minute video, it's about an hour's use of electricity for an average Western household, which is 10 times or more of an average African household or Indian household. And then you take a data center and it uses more electricity than a fairly large town. And then you multiply that by millions of servers and billions of people, and it's going to be staggering. So a region like the Middle East that has the energy resources, that has the capital, and I would say the leadership impetus and the agile policy making. There's a real push in this space. And I think that bodes very well for competitiveness in this space and the nexus between AI and energy going forward. I mean, ultimately, energy security is about resilience. It's about resilience of fuels as well as resilience of grids, resilience to geopolitical shocks and market-driven shocks. And that resilience needs to come from responsible investment that's not ideological. And I think unfortunately, we have seen that, 5 years ago, investment in oil and gas was down by 40%. And there was this view of the world that if we starve the supply, while the demand continues to grow, that we're going to solve climate change and the world will be fine. We ended up losing on all three elements of the so-called trilemma: the availability, affordability, and the sustainability. And that is the priority order, by the way, for consumers and especially voters, rightly or wrongly, because it's the order of urgency. If you lose power today, it's a serious crisis. If you have a big bill at the end of the month, that's something else. If it's 1 degree higher temperature for the planet by 2100, that's again a different set of priorities.
How do you think of energy security and how it's changing? Megan mentioned something about export controls being imposed on various types of minerals and commodities that are put out there. The whole definition of energy security is shifting as well. How do you see this?
Focus on critical minerals has exploded. You see policymakers in all the major capitals focused on it. Markets have become disrupted through export controls, tariffs, and other mechanisms. But overall, I think it's a positive for mining. This is something we've been championing, of course, for decades. None of this happens without the input of metals and minerals. And there's kind of a new kid on the block when it comes to energy commodities, and it's copper. Fatih made the point that electricity demand is going at 3 times the growth rate of primary energy, and that is super copper intensive. You need it for the wires. Copper data center is very copper intensive. Renewable energy is copper intensive. So we're expecting a near doubling, about 70% increase in copper demand over the next 25 years. But that happens against the backdrop of where it's becoming harder and harder to find new copper deposits. And the ones that are being found are lower grade, deeper, more technically challenging. They have more surface risks. And so there's a real conundrum out there as to how this demand is going to be met. It'll be met, but policymakers, private or capital markets and private companies need to be working together to ensure it's done in as seamless a fashion as possible. And that requires policy reform. It requires a real focus on the part of capital markets on the economic opportunity at hand. And it requires companies to be operating in a way that makes them welcome in some of these countries. And I might disagree with Fatih on one point around who's winning in this world of increased focus on energy security. And I'd say it's South America possibly, or on the cusp of it, because it's a copper-rich region, and with increased focus on the importance of copper to ongoing economic growth, to the energy transition, to the digital transformation, I think there's an opportunity there for them. Now, how does it impact the companies specifically like BHP? We need more energy to drive our operations, and that can be electrification of our trucks, our locomotives. That's very energy intensive, and we're trying to do that through deployment of large amounts of renewables. In our iron ore business alone, to electrify that business is going to require 5 times as much electricity as we use today, so this is no small task. We need more reliable, low-cost energy to power the smelters that are required to smelt things like copper. And then finally, of course, we focus on what the big trends are in terms of energy demand, and then we read through from that to what that means for metals and minerals, because that then drives our thinking around the portfolio and some of our big investments. So supply chain resilience, obviously increasingly in focus, starts with being able to get more resources out of the ground more quickly, and that's no easy task in this world of heightened community concern, bigger regulatory burden in many jurisdictions. But a number of governments, you see this in the US, you see it in Canada, Australia, Argentina, and elsewhere, are really focused on streamlining that regulation, which should make that easier. You then have processing. Fatih's absolutely right. It's, you can get ore out of the ground, but you have to be able to smelt it and refine it to turn it into a useful metal. And in today's world, there's an increasing focus on how you go about developing more smelters and refineries closer to end markets. But that requires low-cost energy, requires availability of energy, and it requires people willing to invest in something that in our sector tends to be a lower returning part of the value chain. And that's one of the key reasons things have migrated to China, is because they have had low-cost energy and they've had people willing to invest in these things. But you're seeing growing focus on that on the part of other governments as well.
How does a company like AES and how does your sector think about energy security? How are you delivering it? What's the kind of mix between grid, input, storage? Just tell us how you're thinking about energy security.
So thinking about energy security, I'll complicate it a little bit, because I think there's not like one answer fits all. And there are very different circumstances in different countries. US is one particular case. Other countries are very different. We're seeing somewhat of a divergence because there's, for example, in renewables, you're having access to very cheap Chinese equipment outside the States. So for example, it's very difficult to compete today with solar plus batteries in most of the world, most of the developing world. Whereas in the States, you have a greater reliance, for example, on natural gas. So I think that there's too much sort of a politicization rather than a technical talk. I also think that when we're addressing this issue, we have to think about technologies. So I think a lot of the problems when people say there's not enough, say, transmission to go, it's thinking about using the transmission as we use it today. So here we're installing this massive data center and we're operating the grid basically like the 1950s. So things like, for example, dynamic line rating can really free up a lot. Using batteries. So batteries are turning out to be like a hammer. You can use batteries to use the transmission lines at their real capacity. So you realize we build the whole distribution network to peak load. Peak load may be 1 hour a day. So you have excess capacity. But the problem is, how do you get that? Well, by using batteries, you can transmit electricity on off-peak hours. And this saves you a lot of time. Now, there's a problem with the business models. Transmission companies make more by investing more. So there are a lot of technical solutions today, using the existing infrastructure smarter, which will help. Then when we think about AI, in the States, it's an enormous demand. Outside the States, it's not as a huge factor. And the fact is, in the States, we're not used to growing. In the States, we're growing 3 to 5% because of data centers, in part. It's not only data center. We operate in Vietnam, which traditionally grows at 10% a year. Wow. If you think of China. So it's the problem in the States. So I think, yes, in the States, we have to really use every electron we want. It's not only a question of how many megawatt hours you can produce. It's when you can produce them. It's a problem of dispatchable energy. It's a question really of having the capacity. And there are problems there, because if you want to build a new gas plant today, it's going to take us 5 to 7 years. Mm-hmm. So, that's a problem. So what I see is the problem of time. I think Fatih mentioned really indirectly elasticity. So you have short-term elasticity where you can't do many things, but you have a lot greater elasticity in the long run. So I also agree with Mike. We're not going to run out of things because people will adapt. That's one thing we've seen. You substitute. Cobalt became expensive in the batteries. Well, you substitute it, for manganese. So we get a lot of things. And the last thing I think that's very interesting is AI is part of the problem, but it's also part of the solution. We can operate the grids much more intelligently. When you talk about electric vehicles, those are really mobile batteries. But what you need is the intelligence to charge them up at the right time and discharge them. And then there's a problem of the business model. How do you make it really work optimally? So I think the technology is there. I find that a lot of the thinking is politicizing. It's like, either 100% renewables or you're against renewables. This makes no sense whatsoever. With today's technology, you have to combine the two. In the future, we can delay it. And the other thing is a lot of noise sometimes on Wall Street, especially like, say, nuclear. I'm a great believer in SMRs, small modular reactors. But I think it's going to be a decade at least before we have them. And so, you have to think about the whole supply chain. Who's going to build them? Yeah. Where are we going to build dozens of nuclear reactors in the States? Where are the factories? Where are the people who are going to build these? Where are the people who are going to operate them? So I find that there's a lack of talk about the supply chain. So overall, I don't think this is a zero-sum game. The title of this talk is a little bit, who's winning implies somebody's losing. I actually think the more secure a region is on its energy will free up resources for other regions. Yeah. So I think it's, who's doing better perhaps.